Now this is an open differential. It's an 8-inch with 355 gears, open diff. Here's how you can tell though that I'm not lying about that. I'm going to spin this passenger wheel forward. Watch the driver's wheel. It's spinning backwards. The two wheels spin opposite of each other. Okay? Now, that proves that it's an open differential, right? There's spider gears in there, it's an open diff. Passenger side wheel spinning forward, driver's side spinning backwards. Now, let me show you something. The car spins both wheels, but it's an open diff. Now, the place you always see me test and tune at, I usually use the same place, quite often. Because for one thing, it's out middle of nowhere, and it's out on a side road. It's not a road, it's like a little nook off the side of the highway that that nobody goes down. So it's exclusive. I don't have to worry about anything. I can set up a camera, right? That's the main part. I can set up a camera. Now, it's a dusty, gravelly, it's a mess. It's a mess of a place. You'll never find traction there regardless. Doesn't mean I don't go out and do it other places too. Now, how did I manage to make this happen? I'll tell you. Okay, so before I can tell you exactly how I went about making it perform that way, the open diff, we have to first understand what it is the open diff is doing and what forces we're trying to counteract here. Now, the open differential, believe it or not, sends perfectly 50-50% of the engine power to both wheels at all times. Now, you might be wondering, how is that possible? Because one wheel will spin, one wheel peel, and the other wheel won't. How is it sending 50-50 power exactly every time to both wheels? When we say 50-50 power, what we really mean is whatever this tire sees, that tire over there sees too. So however much force this tire is getting, put down to the ground, that's how much force that tire is going to put down to the ground. 50-50 split. Whatever this tire puts to the ground, so does that one. Well, when you break traction with one side, your one wheel peel, what's going on is you're no longer putting power down to the ground, it's just spinning away. Once you break traction, it's a lot easier to stay, it's not gripping the road nearly as much anymore, right? It's easier to keep a wheel that it's already spinning than it is to get it spinning in the first place. Does that make sense? So because it no longer is putting much power to the ground because it's just burning, that tire doesn't get as much power given to it. 50-50 split, but it's only 50-50 of what it's using. If it's not using a lot of power to rotate, well, that one doesn't get a lot of power to rotate. Now that's one thing that's happening. Another thing that's happening is as you accelerate, as the engine is torquing over, it is trying to lift this driver's side front up. As it does that, it is trying to plant this passenger side down. Bikes everywhere. So, it's trying to lean over onto this tire. Now that's a good thing. That's what we want. But there's an opposite reaction. As this engine is torquing, right, it's torquing this way. That goes through the transmission, through the drive shaft, into the rear end. And what happens once it gets to the rear end is that it goes through the pinion gear and the ring gear, and all of a sudden forces transfer, and it wants to lift this tire up. This tire and axle is trying to rotate this way as the engine is rotating this way. It is trying to slam the body down and lift the tire up at the same time, sandwiching it. Okay? And that sandwiching effect is why the passenger side tire is the one that always breaks traction first. That's the forces at play here. As the car's, you know, doing its thing, sandwiching that passenger side rear, unloading the rear passenger side rear tire, that tire naturally has less traction to begin with. So when that starts to spin, it's just freewheels. And then the driver's side rear doesn't get any power given to it, because the passenger side rear isn't using a whole lot of power in order to rotate and spin it. Okay? But here's what we're trying to achieve. 50-50 power. If we can get both tires to plant evenly, have the same amount of grip, have the same amount of bite, then they will both receive the same amount of power. One won't be freewheeling any more than the other one would, and it will burn both tires and accelerate forward. So how do we achieve that with all those forces acting against us? Well, here's step one. I have eliminated the front sway bar. What the front sway bar does is it locks the two sides of the suspension, front suspension, together. Okay? So if one is trying to rotate up, like the engine's trying to lift this side up, as it's doing that, it is tied directly to this side, so this side also has to rise more or less at the same rate. That's good for handling, but it's not good for weight transfer. We want this driver's side to be able to raise independently of the driver's side, because it will give more bias to that passenger side, the one that's always, you know, unloading. It will give more transfer, more diagonal weight transfer onto that rear tire, keeping it planted on the ground a little better. Stance. We don't have a crazy back end jacked way up, nose down on the ground stance. That doesn't allow weight transfer to happen at all, because you need this weight to get above the rear axle, right, in order for it to start working. If you got all this weight slammed to the ground, this ass end jacked way up, you're not allowing any weight to actually pivot onto these back tires. 90-10 shocks in the front, because I want it to be hard to compress but easy to come up. So the front end, I don't know if you can see that, but the front end is loosey-goosey. So all of that weight freely comes up to plant on the back. In contrast, the rear end of this car is stiff. Like, it doesn't move. It's a rock. It doesn't, there's no downward play at all. Motorcycle, just drive somewhere else. You don't need to drive in the middle of the town. Motorcycles. Now, the reason we have the rear end so stiff is because we want all of the weight transfer to be applied to the tire, not the suspension. If your suspension is loose and absorbing all of that weight transfer, well, it's not getting to the tire. You have it nice and stiff, everything gets directly applied to the tire. There's no squish. This extra leaf right here, and makeshift, I don't know if you can see that, makeshift DIY coilovers. That's the way I achieve that. Now we run a slapper bar suspension on the back. The slapper bars work really simply. Now the slapper bars work like this. You see, it's tied to the leaf spring on either side of the axle. So when the axle rotates, just when it's trying to make that front half of the spring into an S, because the engine torque is lifting the nose of the pinion up as it, torques and rotates on that gear. As it does that, it will bring this bar up and slap right at the eye of the leaf spring. When that happens, it makes that a solid connection, and all the force gets planted on the tire. Now what we have over there, as you can see, there's a gap. It's about an inch. Over here, we have her basically touching, okay? Why? All in the name of getting this passenger side rear to get stuck and planted and overcome the forces trying to sandwich this in place, right? We have more force getting put down. We have the slapper bar hitting this side first. This side gets hit first. That side has a delayed reaction. It forces this tire down to the ground, so it bites just as much as that tire does over there, making it equal, letting you do a two-wheel burnout, right, with an open differential. Now this isn't something that just happens. You have to work at it, right? You have to tune it, you have to crawl under there, 5-6 times and shim, stuff, the slapper bars just a little bit, and see where's it gonna work, right? Phone died right in the middle of recording the video. Can you believe it? But anyways, this stuff doesn't just happen, okay? But if you apply all of these different parameters, you don't have to do it exactly the same way I did, but just these principles, right? Know that the rear end is working against you. The axle is trying to rotate up, the body's trying to rotate down. It's making a sandwich, unloading that, just understand that. You need more bias to the passenger side rear. We have that with the preloaded suspension, the slapper bars and everything, right? If you do that and you fine tune it, you will be able to do, both wheels spinning with the open diff. Now, spinning the wheels is not what we're necessarily after, right? Our goal is not to just leave black marks, ultimately, Our goal is to actually stick and book, right? But on the street, being able to see, right? Being able to see two black marks on the street, you're never going to get traction on the street. It's just not going to happen. Not with the equipment we're working with. But if you're visually able to see that it's leaving two black marks, then you have the rear end more or less planted evenly. The Mustang, she dog walks over on the passenger side a bit, but we can fix that with air pressure and stuff to the tires, just so long as the suspension is planting the two tires evenly enough that they're both spinning. Then when we take it to the track, we know that that's pretty much sorted. We just got to work with air pressure and that kind of stuff just to get it not to dog walk quite as bad, but that's minor stuff. The major thing is to not have the one wheel peel, which I've achieved, and so can you. So come and join me and the open diff gang. All right, we're going performance with less is more, right? That's what I'm saying. So, you use that for what you will. I'll catch you next time.